I struggled with bulimia for 15 years. I only battled it for 13. For those first 2 years, bulimia was actually my escape, and I absolutely loved having it in my life. And it helped me cheat the system when it came to food. We were allies. But eventually, our partnership became a painful, heavy burden that I was ashamed of carrying, and I wanted nothing more than to put down and walk away from. Only, it seemed like I couldn't. I tried to fight it on my own, telling myself things like, today is the last day I'm gonna binge and purge. And I'd give myself a sort of last feast goodbye. I had a big calendar at my apartment during university days where I'd mark in red the days I binged and purged, counting the days in between. My heart would drop each and every time I'd pick up the red Sharpie and filling another day. I kept count of the days that I didn't binge and purge. Sometimes I'd make it up to a week. Other times, just 2 days. Each day I binged and purged would mark day 0, and I felt extreme shame and disappointment whenever I erased the number that marked my progress and replaced it with a 0. There were also many consecutive zeros. I told myself each month that I wasn't gonna binge and purge from that point onward. And then I'd slip and give myself a pass, and then 2, and then 3, and I'd be back at it again. Telling myself this is the last month, planning to stop as soon as the next one begins. I made deals with God I didn't believe in, that if He helped me stop binging and purging, I'd do this and that. I made deals with myself, that if I stopped, I'd buy myself this and that. When I turned 30, I worked with a therapist for a couple of sessions. I was determined. No more bulimia when I'm 30. That's it. That didn't help either. I couldn't afford a therapist and my bulimia, and I chose to keep funding my bulimia. Deep down, I didn't really want to let go of it. I used to binge and purge while watching movies and TV shows. I can't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I paired eating and eventually binging and purging with watching TV. If there wasn't anything to watch, I wouldn't eat. So I wouldn't binge. And the end of a movie or a series episode always marked the end of a binge. Over time, as I discovered streaming services, especially Netflix, my binging and purging got way worse. I could do it for hours on end. Eventually, the food would run out, and I'd stop. But the more food I had, the longer the binge and purge session went on. There was always something to watch, and man, do I love watching movies and series. In time, I started getting triggered the moment I turned Netflix on. Not by what I was watching, but by the act of giving my attention away to something outside of myself. The moment I stopped my brain from thinking about anything, I went on autopilot. I was eating out of habit, without thinking about what I was doing, which made it easier to just keep going. The problem was that, aside from exercising and working a dead-end job, binging and purging was basically the only thing I did. I'd wake up, exercise, shower, work, and after work, I'd go to the shop to get my binging feast, return home, and start the destruction cycle. On days I didn't binge and purge, I'd go out with friends, who of course had no idea about my secret life. Sometimes I'd go out, then I'd come home and binge and purge until I was too tired to continue. I never learned new skills or read books anymore. I was just watching, sometimes rewatching, the same movies and shows over and over again. I hated the fact that some of my favorite shows, like Friends and Prison Break, were tied to endless binging and purging sessions. I always wanted to have my own business and make something of myself. But whenever I decided to explore a career path, I'd dabble with it for a while. But as soon as things got challenging, I'd numb by diving into a movie or a TV show, and bulimia would be in the front seat again. I picked the path of least resistance, the easy way out, and I hated myself for it. Still, the natural curiosity I've always had and the desire to stop being bulimic and do something great with my life were always present in me, like a fire that wouldn't go out no matter what. I kept exploring different career paths, mostly creative ones, until I found coaching. My coaching career was born by accident. It all started with my desire to release the social anxiety that had accompanied me for most of my life and was becoming an obstacle when it came to exploring career paths. There was a huge discrepancy between who I was, how I behaved and reacted to people, and the person I wanted to be. I was fearful, timid, and reactive around people, when I wanted to be curious, reflective, calm, and collected. I knew I was smart, strong, and capable, but I wasn't behaving like it. And it dawned on me that I was no different than the people I didn't admire. the ones who talk and talk but never do anything. So I started exploring how I could become the person I wanted to be. I listened to podcasts, read books, watched TED Talks to understand my social anxiety better. From there, I got hooked on CBT and learning how to ask myself better questions that would help me change some of the beliefs I had about myself and others. I kept exploring and tweaking until I adopted the beliefs that made me comfortable in my own skin, and eventually allowed me to walk up to anyone I wanted to talk to, even a total stranger, without hesitation. But with that new social confidence, I was still struggling with bulimia. It was still serving me. The shift started to happen when I enrolled in a coaching course. In one of the lessons, the instructor made a note that not everyone actually wants to change, even when they say they do. He said, "People don't change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing." I reflected on my life, my boring, destructive life where every day was the same. And I thought to myself, I should be wanting to change this. I should be wanting more than this. I wasn't doing anything worthwhile with my life, and I was ashamed and disgraced by the way I was living. I didn't have any values, and I was abusing my body carelessly, as if I was going to live forever. I was furious with myself for not being in pain over living a meaningless, empty life. For realizing that despite all of my effort to stop binging and purging, I didn't really want to change. But you know what? That still wasn't enough for me to stop. It took months, a ton of work, endless reading and reflecting, more exposure to conversations and ideas that slowly started changing my perspective. With every new piece of information, I also started to behave more like someone I admired. I took working out and eating healthy more seriously. I stopped planning my binges and purges. They still happened here and there, but I stopped romanticizing and looking forward to them. Whenever the thought popped up, I'd redirect my mind from fantasizing about my favorite foods to visualizing myself in the bathroom, head in the toilet, vomit coming out of my mouth, and I'd ask myself, is this who you want to be? Really? Do you want to do this forever? I chose to distract myself by thinking about something else I actually wanted to do and found joy in. How about I listen to this podcast instead? How about I draw or paint? How about I read? I'd look myself dead in the eyes in the mirror and say, I don't want to long for this. I don't want to be this person anymore. And the urge would pass, sometimes quickly, other times it took a few tries. I stopped spending as much money on food and kept my binge sessions minimal. Eventually, I stopped buying food for the purpose of binging. I only purged if I'd eaten so much my stomach was upset and I couldn't stand up straight. It wasn't just one thing that helped me stop binging and purging, but a collective of things that wouldn't have worked without me releasing shame and judgment from myself. Accepting myself as the flawed human I am, and the fact that I'll always be an addict. Bulimia will always live in me, and that's okay. On a more practical note, here's what I did. I took inventory of my values, decided what I wanted to keep and what wasn't mine to begin with and needed to go. I scratched out most of my goals and replaced them with ones that felt true to me, even if they wouldn't make sense to most people. After all, I wasn't like most people. I stopped consuming short-form content and replaced them with podcasts, long-form videos, articles, and books. I made a point to create more than I consume. I asked my partner to delete the Netflix app from our TV. I started practicing being in silence and having conversations with myself. Where in the past my hand would automatically reach for the phone to scroll Instagram, now I keep it out of reach. And if it's within reach, I ask myself, what do I really want right now? Could I be served better by me looking out the window, taking a deep breath, and giving myself a mental break? Lastly, and most importantly, I told my partner about it. At this point, I was living with him, and I only binged and purged on days he was at the office or on a trip. When he'd call or come home and ask, "How was your day?" I said everything except the binging and purging part, which sometimes was the only part. I was lying to him, and I hate lying with a passion. I thought about how I would feel if he kept something from me. If he was hurting himself and I didn't know about it, and it devastated me. I didn't want to do that to him. I didn't want to hide and sneak around anymore. The truth finally completely sank in. I will never, ever be the person I want to be if I don't stop binging and purging. I had to choose. It was either bulimia or the rest of my life. There was no other way around it. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you being here, And if you want to read this article and many more, then head on to my Substack. The link is in the description.